You're going to want to start with a new composition, and it should be an option right away. And you're doing the side panels as well, right?
Yeah, but they're gonna be in a different thing, I think, because the side panels basically until like it focuses on the main back one when like
Right.
this stuff happens.
Yep.
It's just gonna be clouds.
Okay.
And then they're gonna go dark.
And the clouds aren't necessarily going to cross over the corner?
No, they're just gonna be kind of by themselves, just kind of. There's gonna be like two on each or something like that. They're just gonna be chilling.
Good. All right. So then, in that case, when you create a new composition, we're only thinking about the back panel for now. So for the width, we're going to say 1920 pixels wide, and for the height, 1080 pixels wide. And those are the same settings that are in Flip-a-Clip and as their highest quality export.
Okay.
We can also choose what the frame rate is going to be. That's how many frames per second, or FPS.
I have been doing 8 because
That's good. That's totally good for your...
Yeah, because I've been kind of wanting to do the like old school, like animation looking sort of thing.
So we have a couple options. We could either leave this at 8, or what might make sense would be to do, say, 16 frames per second to double that. And we can always leave your footage at 8, so it'll essentially be showing 2 of every frame. It'll look the same visually, but the advantage of this is if you're going to, say, have the sun move up and down, it can move with twice as much smoothness vertically, but still have the kind of pleasant choppiness of the 8 frames per second. So I'll try that here at 16. We'll see how it goes. At the bottom, there's an option for duration. I'm going to set this to, say, 4 minutes for now, and click OK. All right, so that makes a big black composition. There's nothing in it, but the dimensions should be the same dimensions as what your Flip-a-Clip will be. If you double-click on the gray area to the bottom of your project window, this is the same as importing footage. You can also go to File, Import, does the same thing. And I'm going to go to a folder that I just made for you where your MP4 file is. This is what you got from Flip-a-Clip. And I'll click on Open. Okay, there's the sun. And we can even now drag that little new sun file, sun.mp4, right into the timeline.
Okay, I actually kind of am understanding this more than I thought I would because it's very similar to the editing thing I used for my YouTube videos.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, like the idea of a timeline and there being blocks.
Yeah,
it's probably very familiar.
Yeah.
Now, a couple things are a little unique about After Effects. If you have any piece of footage that's selected by clicking on it, it shows you what it's selected in the timeline as well as in this viewer at the top right. But if there's a watermark here that we want to get rid of, we can actually, as long as the footage is selected and you see it selected like that, if you were to go up to the top and grab this rectangle and draw a rectangle right over the piece of footage, it treats it like a mask. It says everything inside the rectangle show me, everything outside completely disappears or becomes transparent, which is nice.
That is really nice.
Yeah, so that's good. Are you on a Windows or a Mac at home?
I have one.
A Windows machine or a Mac machine? A MacBook? Okay, Mac. Okay.
I mean, I have both.
Both. So if you're on a Mac, Command minus and Command plus will let you zoom in or zoom out of this viewer window. Now, one thing we might want to do is to essentially remove the white background. If you don't buy the premium version or for whatever reason it doesn't work to save the transparent white background, to make the white not opaque but see-through, we can have After Effects do that. So once again, making sure the clip is selected, which it is, we can go up to Effect, and it's called keying. This is where you remove any colors and make them transparent. So this is like green screening. It's the same idea.
Is it also where you can like change the colors? Or?
That's actually a whole different thing.
Okay.
The whole purpose of keying is
the
whole purpose of keying is just to remove any specific colors and say we don't want to see you anymore. So under keying, we're going to go down to color range is a good one. And how color range works is you choose this little eyedropper to say, I want to choose a color, let's say white here. If there's too much fuzziness in that white, it'll actually start to remove any white pixels that are present in the rest of the image. And so this is the place where having that texture in the background might bite us in the butt a little bit, because if I kind of go around and grab more and more colors.
I mean, I think we figured out that we can make it a plain background.
Yeah, let's.
If we try hard enough.
Right. let's see what
Is there a way to like
happens.
select like everything but?
Yeah, let me see if we can get this going. Lab, let's see, RGB. There we go. Okay, so I set the color space from lab color to RGB color, and now we can see we got rid of most of the background. We have kind of a like overly crisp edge.
Yeah, I over.
That's okay. That's actually another thing that we can potentially play with here.
Yeah.
So again, now that we went to RGB and we clicked on the white background with this eyedropper, the fuzziness setting is what makes it essentially say not just that color of white, but the neighboring colors as well. So you can always play with that. You just want to make sure you're not losing pixels inside of in this case, the middle of the sun. Now, if you want to play with that edge a little bit, there's another option under Effects, also under Keying, or actually, let's see, is it Matte? I guess it's Matte. We have some options for what's called a matte choker. And by choker, you can just imagine the selection has this kind of, in this case, a circle around it. Choking it would be kind of bringing that selection inwards or outwards or changing something about it. So we can try matte choker and see what options it gives us. Here we can kind of see how it's kind of subtle, but it's kind of pulling in some of those edges a little bit. There also might be some softness settings. You can kind of see by changing gray level softness. That little bit of fuzziness might help.
Yeah, and also another thought I was having is that I might not even do the little border around it and just kind of let it be a little run
edge.
over because that's how the sun really is.
Absolutely. So now by the way, I pulled this top gray tab, like the thicker of these little, or the thinner of these little gray tabs in the timeline. This is essentially zooming in to getting closer and closer into the beginning of the timeline. And this little blue marker here is your playhead. So this kind of shows us where we are in the frames. So we brought this movie in, it was running at 8 frames per second. And so we're essentially looking at 1 second of animation here. We can see some kind of variations in there, and that's fine.
And it's just fine.
Yeah. One really good thing to know about is in After Effects, if you right-click in your kind of assets, and this will hold all your assets, all your movie files, images, sound, and so on. If you right-click on your assets and go to Interpret Footage and Main, this is where you can change the frame rate. If you wanted to. We'll leave it at 8. But maybe even more importantly for us, at the bottom there's an option to loop it. And you can say, hey, I want to loop this X number of times. So in this case, let's say 200 times. Or 200 seconds, really. We'll click OK. And now that we've done that, what used to be just 1 second, now there's actually just like a lot more footage. It's going to show up as looped footage, but this can kind of extend more and more and more. And so now we kind of get a sense of the sun just perpetually looping and pulsing, which is kind of nice. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I'll extend the playhead here to be, a couple minutes long. Okay, now what's nice about this is your sun is separated. It has kind of a position and so on. So if you wanted to do, say, a sunrise.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next.
Yeah.
To figure out how to.
Was it going to kind of rise up, or are you going to have it set from the top?
I was going to have it rise up.
Rise up, okay. I'll just show you just generally how to do it, and you can change the when of the rise and so on. So if you twirl down, there's a little triangle to the left of each layer. If you twirl that little triangle down, there's a setting for masks, effects, and transform. Transform has your position, your rotation, your scaling, all that stuff can happen in here. So this is a good space for us. And I'm going to pretend here that I want it to have it say start at 5 seconds and end at 15 seconds. Okay. So how this works is you go to the starting point in time in the timeline. Let's say 5 seconds. Roughly there, okay. And you move it down to where you want it to start, in this case off screen. And you're going to click on the little alarm clock to the left of position, since that's the channel of animation you want to affect. If you were rotating it, you would, click on rotation instead. But it turns blue. When it's blue, it means, hey, I'm paying attention to you. Any movement over time, I will actually add keyframes for you. And it's called keyframing when a little blue diamond shows up. The tricky here is not to hit the blue alarm clock icon again. You only turn it on once and you leave it on. If you click it again, it deletes all your keyframes.
Oh yeah.
So big place to
fun.
lose a lot of work. So just to recap, we're at 5 seconds. We clicked on the blue alarm clock. We have the little blue diamond saying, all right, 5 seconds in, that's where it's going to be located. Then you go to the new point in time, in this case 15 seconds, and then you just move the object to where you want it.
Okay.
In this case, let's say dead center. Now, After Effects will do the work for the in-betweens for you. Okay, so it's going to say, hey, you told me you wanted to be here at one time, here at the other time. I'm going to assume that I can interpolate those frames in between. And there we have our first little piece of motion. If you ever wanted to go in between those two locations and say, hey, you were actually supposed to bend a little bit, you can add in between kind of keyframes and it will start to follow that path for you. If you ever want to preview this, you can always hit the space bar. The space bar will preview. Okay. The first time it goes, it may be a little bit slow to preview because it's trying to save these files to your RAM on your computer. But then when it's kind of done, you can click, and the next time around, it should show it at its full speed.
It looks like it's like.
Yeah, it almost has a kind of rotation look.
Yeah.
But there we go.
Oh,
there's
okay.
kind of initial
That makes sense.
type of movement. If, just generally speaking, you may not want this to happen for this clip, but let's say you wanted it to both get into a new position and change size. Okay, it's really good to know that, and this is not obvious, over where we have the kind of position channel that you've animated on, they're little arrows. These little arrows let you jump to already pre-existing keyframes.
Oh.
And so let's say, I noticed at the beginning, oh no, like I can actually see for the beginning of this, I can see the little sun tip that's showing up at the bottom of the frame. What that really means is your first keyframe wasn't quite low enough. So you could click on that arrow and say, oh, I actually meant to take that keyframe and have it be down even lower.
Okay.
So you can edit these frames after the fact. It's just really important that you're actually on the keyframe instead of one frame to the right or to the left of that little diamond. If you have that by accident happen, you'll see a big stutter, like a very quick jump, because it's going to think you're going to want per frame changes. But in the same way that you can jump to another frame, let's say I go back to the first keyframe for the position of the sun. Let's say we also want to change the scale of the sun. So I'll click on scale and say, okay, it's going to start at that size. By the time it comes to the very end keyframe where it lands in the middle, I clicked on the right arrow for the position. Now I'm at the very last position keyframe. Now I'm also going to change the scale of the sun. And you can do that, just by dragging where it says 100%. Maybe we make that, 200%. Okay, so now it's real big. Now it's going to both grow and rise at the same time. So multiple types of animation can happen in the keyframe at the same time. Questions, thoughts, color changes?
I mean, I think I could probably do that. And even if not, like, I can go on something else and change it.
Okay. I'll do a really brief showing of a couple places.
Okay.
Again, with that layer selected, if you want to do any kind of coloration stuff, effect, like you mentioned, color correction, there are many options. Two really, really good ones to know about. A very simple one is hue saturation. That's just like bending the colors on the color wheel. You can always take the color wheel, shift it one way or the other. If you get too dramatic, it gets alien, so you probably don't want to do that. But certainly just kind of changing these 1 or 2 degrees across the color wheel, you can kind of see, you actually get a pretty good amount of control. Any of these, you can, if you don't like what you've done or just things have gone wrong, you can click on it and delete it. Totally fine. If you want finer control over color or just the brightness or exposure of these, if you go to Effect, Color Correction, and a really good one is Curves. This is a really common thing in Photoshop to look at curves. The bottom left of this are the dark parts of your images. of this curve. This middle is the mid-ranges, and the highlights are up at the top. You can add points anywhere along these curves, like I'll add 2 points. And now if I move this bottom point, these are the darker parts of the sun. This one are the brighter parts of the sun. And it's kind of a monotonous color palette, so this isn't quite as obvious as if it were photographed.
Yeah.
But you could similarly have a point in the middle and change these things around. So you can kind of see how you're changing contrast within various specific parts of the tonal range, which is kind of nice. Cool. One more thing to know about, since you're doing low frame rate stuff, like 8 frames per second, there's a little button at the bottom that says toggle switches or modes. If we do this one that has the little boxes, you can kind of see the gray boxes down here. There's one gray box here that looks like 2 little film things. It's called frame blending. If you click that on, there's 2 different options of frame blending. One is the film icon, one is a little arrow. And you have to turn it on at this area. What it's gonna do is between your frames, it's gonna try and blend in between them. So I'm gonna really come in here. Every single frame now, you might notice it might look a little bit more fluid between your frames with that on. If you like it, great. If it's a bad thing, just click that off and it'll go away.
Okay.
While we have the screen recording going, any general things you've been wondering about? I'll be giving you an MP3 version of your song, so you can drop that in and do time and stuff. But anything coming up?
I mean, one of the things that I've kind of been, just not really with this, but with like just kind of a general, but like the background, I'm still so lost on what I want to do.
Got it.
And that was